Oh, good. I'm glad that this started recording before anybody's even joining me. So welcome. It automatically started. So if you are watching this later, thanks for tuning in. I'm so looking forward to chatting with Emma about this book and just her inspiration for it, and her process for writing, and just to see kind of what's next. This is such a cinematic story, and so I'm curious to see, it's optioned for a film and what that might look like. And I absolutely adored Emma's writing. I think she did such a fantastic job, especially for a debut. So I'll be curious to see what is next for her. So I think we had a few people join in. Nora. Hi, Nora. So this started recording right as I started the meeting. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm just going to talk to myself in case anybody jumps on later. Didn't want to be awkward here. So
well, here I am. I'm going to hop off video. I'm going to go into my daughter's volleyball game, but I can't wait to listen in.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for joining in, Nora.
Yeah.
Hi, Brooke.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I was telling Nora I just had to start talking because it started recording right away. So I was like, I didn't want to be awkwardly sitting here by myself if people watch the video later, like, oh, sitting where I'm here. So I might just mess around with my screen. Hi, buddy.
You want to say hi? Can you say hello? Or are you being shy?
That's okay. How old is he, Brooke?
He's 3.
Okay, that's same as my little guy.
Yeah, he'll be 4 in March.
Oh yeah, my guy will be 4 in April, so they're really close.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, he didn't take a nap today, so he's starting to get very sleepy.
Yeah, we know how that goes.
Are you ready for bed? Maybe.
Like, no. Hi, Sherry.
Hey guys.
Hi, Sherry.
How are y'all?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Oh, I meant to mention too, if you guys have your books, I don't know if you'll be like available to hop on the screen later or not, but I thought at the end, like if we just want to do like a quick screenshot with our books up, I almost forgot to grab mine. So I think that would be a good thing to have if you have it on hand. If not, no big deal.
Hello, JJ's.
Okay. And yeah, feel free to sip. I have like a big glass of wine here that for our last like halfway chat, Yvonne and I both had like drinks off to the side, and like nobody else had anything, so we just like kept it hidden. So feel free to like sip or snack or whatever. That's totally fine with us.
I will be having to start dinner in a while.
Yeah.
So I'll be in and out. But
I know. I feel like with the time change, it like is either bedtime or dinner time, or like it gets to be like 10 p.m. for us, which for me is like late, maybe not for other people, but
it's late for me.
Okay.
10 o'clock your time is still late for me, and I'm an hour behind you.
Yeah, I know. So I'm like, then we'd get those like West Coast people probably just perfect, but I would just be dying for the next few days, maybe 2, maybe 3.
Yeah. I don't actually have the book. I did Audible, so I can hold up my phone.
Yeah, just do your phone. That's perfect, Susan. There we go. I like it. I'll probably forget to mention it at the end anyway, so
We can remind you.
yeah. Oh yeah, that'd be great.
And I'm gonna sneak out in a little bit to go get my after dinner snack. I was like, it's too early for my snack right now. And I like snack every night after dinner. I'm like a toddler.
I do the same thing. I do my skinny pop is like my little after bedtime treat when my boys go to bed. I bust out my popcorn.
Yeah, I usually bust out my chocolate once they're in bed.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, now I
I
get
have
some
these
dessert.
cocoa crusted almonds. They're so good.
Ooh.
They're so good.
So I wish there was a way to, and maybe you guys know this, on Zoom, if I could start recording like right when Emma joins us. Last time when I've done a Zoom meeting, like if I stopped the recording and started it back up, it didn't save. So I just didn't know if it was an option to like, I don't know. If people could always probably like fast forward through this if they want, but
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think it's recording now because I was prompted when I came, I had to accept when I joined.
okay. Yeah,
So I think
it
it's
said like I could automatically do it. So I was like, oh, I'll just do that. But then right when I turned it on, I was like, oh, I guess I should probably like talk and say something. Nobody was in the room yet. But I was like, okay, here we go. Yeah, so somebody popped on and I was already like mid conversation with myself. So hi, Brittany.
Hey.
Thanks for hopping on. So did anybody here have questions that I didn't get yet? Or like, I think we'll just do kind of popcorn style once like the people that have asked or have said they want to ask something, once they've gone, I'll just say like, anybody else have a question? And if you do, you can just unmute yourself and then, or, raise your hand, I'll like call, or you can just say like, oh, I have a question, and then jump in and we can just kind of do it that way and just have it be a little bit casual. So if you think of anything, feel free to pop in at any time. All right. Let's see. Oh, I was just thinking, I was like, I see Ivana on the list, but I don't see her.
Yes,
face.
hi. How's it going? Sorry, I'm late. My computer was charging and I'm a bad person. I should have been here earlier. How's it going?
Good.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yes. So I think we can just get started with our own little chat. And then I just told Emma to join us at 8. So I think she'll just like hop on. I don't mind if you're like unmuted at all right now, but maybe when she hops on, like we could just mute if you're like when it's your turn to ask a question, but feel free right now just to do whatever you want. So also,
I like the suggestion that we did before. I can't see if everybody did it, but like changing our name to also have our Instagram handle.
Yes.
Which is like on the 3 dots, like right above your picture or your video screen. I think that there's like an edit name option.
Yeah, right by the mute button. It says you can like click the 3 dots and then click rename.
Yes.
Yeah.
Change mine.
I think that's great because then you can see a face with the Instagram handle.
And I am on a Chromebook and I don't see 3 dots. I did it last time when I joined, so I never had to edit it. But then this time when I joined, I didn't do it. And I don't have 3 dots.
Can you right click on your screen? Sometimes that works also. It'll pull up the options. I mean, right click on your picture.
One in settings and it wasn't.
Oh, Elizabeth, I like your background.
I thought I'd get on theme.
Yeah,
oh,
so grimy. I love it.
Is that a green screen?
You are
awesome.
in the studio. How great.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Well, yeah, I was a little bit late to the game with listening to the Thoughts from a Page podcast. I listened to it today. And so many of the questions that I wanted to ask were answered in the podcast. So if you haven't listened to it, the Thoughts from a Page podcast was just, I know some of us have mentioned people should listen to it, and it was so good. Probably not as good as like having her here in person, but
I know I want to ask her more of like the spoilery questions too that
yes,
you know, Cindy couldn't touch on that podcast.
Right.
So I think that'll be fun to just to have that background info, and then also be able to, you know, just kind of get to the, you know, the nitty gritty. Yeah.
Now, I was just wondering who liked the fact that they did not end up together, and like who loved it and who didn't like that. That was my big thing. It's like, did you like the ending?
I kind of felt like I saw that coming. I don't know how else it would have ended. You know what I mean? I think it was the healthiest way for it to end, and I was okay with it. I liked the ending.
I loved that made me like the book even more, actually, that they didn't end up together, because then it would have been, I don't know, a little cliched.
I felt like I didn't know that they would have, well, she definitely wouldn't have been, I don't think, but I don't think they would have been as successful and as happy if they had stayed together, because I think there was too much push pull. Right. And then, so I think if she'd wrapped it up in that little bow, I think I would have been like, I don't really know. But I thought the way she did it was really, really good. I was pleasantly surprised with how happy I was about the ending.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. Yeah. I was glad it wasn't like tied up too pretty. And I like when books end like in a more realistic way. And I think it ended well. And I agree. It made me like the book even more. I was a little bit nervous, like, please don't make this be cheesy at the end. And like, all right. And everything's great. So it made me like the book more.
And I felt like when they did the So Long Later and then kind of talked about like their lives, I felt like it felt very true to who they were. I mean, I was happy that he got well, and that I felt like she really curated that into the story part well, about how he got sober and his wife and his kids and all the things. But then I also felt like her story was so true to herself as well, like having the daughters and just like, I don't know, I really liked it.
Yeah, I think if she would have ended up with Jesse, I think it would have just gone against everything that she had like kind of fought for, like with the music industry, and kind of like butting up against these just men who were running the show. And then if she all of a sudden just kind of laid down like this doormat and wasn't living a relationship that, you know, was really fulfilling for her, I feel like it just would have gone against, you know, everything that she was up until that point, you know?
Definitely. I feel like the whole fact of her having such a hard time in the music industry, that was one of the most interesting parts to me too, was that she was kind of such a, I don't know how to say it, like a badass. I mean, she was a tough cookie. And she really stood her ground. And so, yeah, going back to him would have been, she had to be so strong though, because man, did they have a connection, even though it was so toxic. It was just, you can tell they couldn't stay away from each other. Just.
So did anybody not enjoy the book or like enjoy it as much as other people? I'm so curious, and like these opinions are so welcome. I would love to know.
I really loved it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go.
I was just going to say, I really, really loved it. I feel like I would have liked to have seen them maybe try to be together when he was sober, because they had such a deep connection. And I felt like it was partly the music industry, but also partly his addiction that caused so much conflict in their relationship. So I was curious to see, as you know, what would have happened if they had tried to see where things went when he was sober and they were living a much simpler lifestyle. But in the end, I totally understood why it ended the way it did. But it was just interesting that, you know, they just remained friends once he was sober. But I really, really loved it. It was very enjoyable.
Oh,
I was going to say, I think I didn't love it as much as I could have if I would have read it. I think the audiobook in this situation made me like it less. I think sometimes it was hard to follow. There were a lot of characters coming and going. And I liked the ending. I kind of like when things don't work out perfectly, However, I wish that there was more shared about the time between when they were together and then the very end. And I say that because I just actually finished, or I'm almost finished with a book called Shoulder Season, and there's a 40-year gap. I don't know if anybody's read that book, but it takes place in the early 80s, and then it fast forwards to 2019. And there's a good amount, like a few chapters that talks about that 40 years, which I just felt I was fulfilled in knowing everything I needed to know about that time gap. And I don't think I got that with this book, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. I didn't listen to it, so I'm wondering how that was,
I agree. I listened to it too, and I have to agree that I think the sub characters were the characters that I didn't connect with, the ones that kind of came in and out. Like, I absolutely loved Jane, and I felt like there was really great character development there. And it made sense, but then I felt like there were parts, just because maybe it was audio, that felt choppy and not 100% explained. But I don't know if it was because of the audio. And again, I was only reading or listening to bits and pieces, and it was obviously it's hard to go back in audio. So I still loved the book. But I felt like maybe I should have, even the song lyrics. I don't know in the book if the song lyrics were italicized or something, but sometimes I didn't even realize if their song if they were song lyrics or what's happening.
Oh, she's speaking in verse.
I know. I'm are you doing a poem or what's happening? But yeah, I felt like the audio was very hard for this one.
Maybe the narrator should have sung at that part.
Yeah, it was weird. She didn't, which
It was weird.
Because I read, when I was reading other reviews, people were like, oh, they either loved the lyrics incorporated or they didn't. And I was like, wait, there were lyrics? I totally missed it.
No, I also thought on the audio part, because I had it, but I also listened to it partly. But I did think it was harder to keep track of all of the people, because there's both sets of bandmates and the manager and her family and his family.
And it was the family part too that I was a little confused with. I was like, who's Rihanna? Who's Elsie? Who's, and then they started calling Charlie. I was like, wait, who's that?
I definitely had to flip back a few times and be like, what are we talking about again? So I think on audio, I can totally understand not maybe connecting with some of those parts of the story very much, for sure.
I agree too. I started the book. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, you're totally fine.
Oh, okay. I also went back and forth, and I started with the physical book, and then I was able to do the audio for a few chapters, but even knowing and having that background, with the physical book that I started with and having feeling really rooted in the story, I still feel like I kind of got lost in the audio, and I listened to a ton on audio. So I don't feel like that happens a lot to me. So I don't know if it was just a lot of the side characters, but I had the same experience. So then I just switched back to the book, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go again. So
this feels better.
Yeah. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I hit that, the grease, the naked people in the caves, all of that. I hit that in the audiobook. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. I shut it off, opened the paper book, and then I realized the lyrics were in there. And then I was like, no, I can't listen to the audiobook. I have to read this thing. So I totally agree.
And it's a bummer, because usually the audiobook for me makes it so much better. I mean, I listen to a ton of audiobooks too, but I'm not an auditory learner. I mean, I know I need to see things for it to sink in. So when you're coming at me with a lot of names, it's just going right through.
I will say the beginning of the book was very slow for me. It took me a while to get, I think I was saying to Kelly, I would read it and be so absorbed in it. But when I closed it, I was in no hurry to get back. I was just it wasn't like holding my attention up until about midway. And then that's when I started to sort of just fly through it. Mostly when it came to the truth about her mom, that really set things off for me.
Songs in Ursa Major.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was for sure the same for
I
me.
agree. I feel like it was like a slow burn in the beginning, and I was more engaging like with the like seeing what was going to happen with Jesse, you know. So I kept on like wanting to know. So I guess that was why I kept on listening or reading, just because I couldn't not know what was going to happen with them and when he was going to come back into the picture. So that was like my motivation.
Did you guys see the mom twist coming?
No, I did not. I don't.
Like that one really caught me off guard.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
oh, wait, what?
I had to reread that part.
I felt like something was going to happen with the mom because I felt like they were talking about it so much and we knew she wasn't, or we weren't sure she was dead, you know? So I didn't expect what happened. I kind of thought she was going to appear or be in LA or something was going to happen. Like she was going to pop back in somehow, but I did not expect how it actually happened.
Was that? I don't know.
I forgot about that, but I thought that was a good, I expected her to pop in somewhere and just show up like she'd been gone gallivanting around the country and then just show back up. I don't know why Jesse got so mad at her though about that. Like I thought his reaction seemed to be too much for that secret.
Yeah, I think was his rationale. He just felt betrayed because he had confided in her like in his loss, but then didn't feel reciprocated. Was that kind of the basis for his anger?
I think so. And I think she was also like, you basically hid your whole, you know, you were acting like you were sober and you weren't, you know. So, and she talked about how she tried to tell him and she could tell him exactly when she tried to tell him and then it just didn't happen. And so, yeah, that was an interesting part of the story. I mean, though, like between them, I thought that was an interesting conversation and how they sort of handled some of those things. But then I felt like the more that happened, it was the more that I was like, I don't think they're going to end up together. Or if they do, I don't know how this is going to work because it just was so volatile. And I was like, I don't know how you get over that.
Yeah, I do feel like kind of touching base about the mental health issues and substance abuse issues. She really covered a lot of ground here and touched on a lot of heavy issues, but I thought she did it in not like a flippant way, but just kind of like in a light touch, and like it was really thoughtful. I thought that she did a great job with that.
Especially with mom, I feel like that could have gone any kind of way. And I feel like she was very delicate with the mom situation. I actually really loved those parts where she would see her. It was heartbreaking, but it was very real.
And even with Jesse too, in the end, like I felt like she could have very easily been like, he recovered and he was doing great and he met this new girl and they fell in love, but it, you know, she talked about him relapsing and how difficult that journey was. And it wasn't until much later in his life that he was able to maintain his sobriety. So I thought that was really a more realistic picture of what life with substance abuse can look like.
Yeah, I won't ask Emma this, but I am curious, like if she does have just like some family member or something that like informed her choices with that, or just the way that she handled it, you know, with such care. If somebody else wants to ask that, go for it, but it's not going to be me. But I am just curious, or if it's just more the like telling of the times, like the sex, drugs, rock and roll, you know, if she was just kind of picking up on that. I'm curious to see. I think Jess was had a question about like her research on the time period and what that, you know, entailed. So I'd be curious to see, you know, what she says about that, at least her research aspect.
Well, and also before she gets here, I mean, she's very young. Like, did you look? I think she's in her early 30s.
Yeah.
Or like mid 30s.
Yeah, she's super
very
young.
impressive.
I checked out her Instagram before this.
Yeah. I mean,
I
that's
feel like on the last one we were trying to sort of stalk and figure this out, but now I can't remember.
Oh yeah, I think we did Google it.
We figured it out somehow, but I don't remember. Wasn't it she? I thought she was
we Googled it.
Yeah.
I thought
she
it
was
was
32.
Yeah, because she was
okay.
my age, but I'm 33 now. So, but
Close enough.
yeah, I remember being like, oh,
Where's
she's
your
right.
book, Kelly? Come on.
I know, that's what I thought. I'm like, oh, where's my novel? It's coming. But I'm so curious too to see what she has in the works, because I thought on the Thoughts from a Page podcast she mentioned that like she had something, but like she couldn't speak of it. But that was months ago, so maybe now like she can talk a little.
I'm also really curious on like,
Is like women read several books.
Oh, sorry, Marley. I think you're unmuted. I don't know if maybe that was.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't know if she was talking.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say,
sorry.
I was just gonna say, I'm also really curious why, like, I don't know how to put this, but like, why did she decide this to be her, like, this, like, kind of genre to be her first novel? Was just her background? And I think there were a couple of questions about, does she have a musical background? But it just seems like there's been so many, like, kind of this, like, rock and roll ever since, like, Daisy Jones. And like how, like almost like how does her genre or this book stand apart, or how did she get to make it stand apart, you know? Because I feel like there's been so many books in
For
this.
those of you that have read Daisy Jones, because I still need to read that one, did you see a similarity? Or
I feel like there's a little similarity. I mean, Daisy Jones was so different just because of the way it was set up, like the interview style, but I don't know. I feel like it was different because there wasn't like the family aspect.
Yeah,
Wasn't.
this one was more about the family relationships.
Yeah.
Kind of the background, and
that one was just like the band.
I actually think I liked that.
The only family
that was missing in Daisy Jones a little bit, which was
Yeah,
just about the band and rock and roll in the time period.
Yeah, and I think I would have connected more with Daisy if they would have pulled in like their backgrounds and maybe where their family.
Yeah, because they only really did the wife and the kids of the main guy, which I can't remember his name now because now I just want to call everybody Jesse. But yeah, I felt like it had similarities but differences. I mean, it definitely feels like it's in the same group of books, but very different stories. And the interview style and that audiobook is where it's like a cast. So every voice is different, which is really cool for the date. It's a very good audio. Yeah.
Sometimes it's fair to compare books like that, and then sometimes it's not fair. But this one was really advertised as like, comparing it to Daisy Jones, and I was curious.
Well, I think it also because Daisy Jones had that love interest, and they always said it was about Fleetwood Mac, and I forgot the bandmates in Fleetwood Mac who it was kind of about. Anyway, and this one was supposed to be about Joni Mitchell, right? And James Taylor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's hard not to compare, I feel like, but
I was hesitant to actually like read this one because I really liked Daisy Jones and the Six. So I was kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to compare. I don't want to, but I found them to be different enough, and I really enjoyed them both, but very separately.
And I was the opposite. I really did not like Daisy Jones and the Six. I think the audio narration was fantastic. They did a really good job with it. I didn't like the story that much, so I was hesitant for this one, but I liked this one a whole lot.
Well, that's interesting.
So my friend Marley she's with her sweet little baby right now, so she's like not on video, but she had a question. She said, so did the mom actually write the song that was presumed to be stolen, or was that a mystery / up for interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
I don't know. I feel like just kind of given her mental health diagnosis that it made me feel skeptical that actually happened, or was that like, did it actually happen and that was the trigger that like sent her down this mental health decline? I don't know. I guess it's up for interpretation unless anybody has any other ideas.
I was
I
back and
feel like
forth.
she purposefully left it up to the reader to interpret, but I would be curious to know what she like thinks, Emma, like what her intention was. But I feel like it was left like that intentionally. I don't know. I could be wrong, but
Yeah, that's a good question for Emma.
I think I was guessing just like, well, I don't know if anybody else was just saying it. Kelly, I agree with you where I think I interpreted it as mom did not write the song. But they had me for a few times where until I fully understood what was happening with her, but maybe it was a trigger.
I kind of felt the opposite because I felt like maybe because she wrote the song and because of how the whole situation played out, that it pushed her over the edge.
Yeah.
That she
Yeah.
was like, no, that's mine. But she had no way to really get it back because
Yeah.
that guy was a guy musician in that world. And she was just this writer in this small town. And I felt like she felt so powerless that it maybe pushed her over the edge. I went back and forth a lot. That's
Yeah.
where I sort of came to eventually, that I felt like that was kind of the final thing. But I don't know. That's a good question for Emma, I think.
Yeah, if somebody wants to snag that, I don't know if Marley's going to be like, she has like a little 3-week-old, so I don't know if she'll be up for like being on the video, but if anybody wants to snag that question and ask Emma, I think she'd probably appreciate it. Did anyone else have just any like clarifying questions as they were reading that other group people might be able to help answer?
Or like I tell my students, if anyone needs a bathroom break or if you need to go get a drink, now's a great time. Oh.
I hopped on late, but I was wondering if anybody thought Janie Q had the kids with Jesse. Did you talk about that?
No, we didn't, Annie. No.
I didn't even think about that. That's a really good question because she had kids, but they said
yeah, they
the
didn't
father
say,
was not.
right?
All the women in the family had kids, but no attached fathers, I think.
Yeah, I thought that was odd that she didn't say who the father was at the end. She just said she had 2 kids and then he married someone else. So that made me think like, I wonder who the father was.
Oh, well, Emma is here, so ask her that later, maybe, Annie. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us. This is amazing.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here and also to have like all this access to creep on all of your amazing bookshelf. This is so fun.
Oh, well, we were just wrapping up our conversation and the consensus was we all thoroughly adored your book and just I think there's a lot of great things to unpack here and we have a lot of questions that we're hoping you can answer for us. So I'm Kelly and I'm co-hosting with Ivana and she's at Beaches Books and Bubbles. So we thought we would start just by asking you a few questions and then we're just going to kind of go popcorn style. We've all kind of submitted questions in our group chat ahead of time. And so I'm just going to kind of call out on people that have had questions that they would like answered. And then I'm sure that we'll have a few more that have come up just from our chat recently that people would love to know. So I thought we could just get started and have you tell us a little bit about just your writing process and inspiration and just kind of some of the background for Songs in Ursa Major.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here and it's really great to meet you all. And thank you so much for reading the book. This is such a dream come true to get to talk to like was 18 people. This is crazy. So I'm really thrilled. So my process, well, so I had a couple disparate ideas at first that I kind of just had in my head for a year or so. Like I knew I wanted to write about this family on an island of women. I knew I wanted to do that. And I knew that there was going to be a music component. And when I started to get serious about sitting down to actually write this, I was like, okay, so let's like try to hammer some of this out, think it through. I had James Taylor in my head because I'd been sort of thinking about Martha's Vineyard as an island and he's a huge figure there. And I went there growing up. So I I'm attached, and it's like a total fantasy of mine to just bop off and live there. So that came from like a sort of wish fulfillment at my day job. Like, whoa, wouldn't it be nice if I was just on this island? And so the more I started to research him and the various other people at that time, I was sort of toggling between whether I wanted to have like a millennial story where it would be sort of like a "this is where I leave you" funeral plot, where a millennial Jane would have come back to the island after the death of a parent. And so I originally was researching Dolores O'Riordan, like a completely different set of musicians. And you can actually kind of see a little bit of a vestigial tale of that, because the Breakers still have the same makeup as the Cranberries did, with the two brothers and the three guys and the woman lead singer. But what ended up happening was I started researching, pop singers from the late 60s, early 70s with Carly Simon, because obviously she goes with James Taylor. And I was like, well, that's easy. And I was reading about her, and her life didn't really fit in with what I'd envisioned for this family. Like, she's from a really affluent, connected background, and I like that character, but it wasn't exactly what I thought. And then she had this little aside in her autobiography about running into JT before they were a couple, when he was with his girlfriend at the time, Joni Mitchell. And that completely blew my mind, because it turned out he'd written "You Can Close Your Eyes" about Joni. And the idea, like, I've known that song forever. And the idea that I could know this song by heart, have a whole like story for it in my head, and that story wasn't actually true and a different story happened. I just loved the mechanism that I experienced with that. And from there, the book kind of just started to unspool. Like, I read a ton about Joni Mitchell. I listened to Blue, I listened to Mudslide Slim, I listened to, obviously, to Sweet Baby James. And at a certain point, I was just so excited with this, I started writing it. And from there, it was just a blast, like just a ride. I just felt like I was eavesdropping almost. And the first draft was really bad and really messy and really fast. And basically, like, what the overall structure and plot of the book came through then. And then I sort of tricked myself into editing it. I basically like sat down, I was like, this is just a polish. It's just a polish. And I put on track changes. And then if you look at the versions that I saved of those track changes, it's like the whole page is red, but the word Jane is in black and the word Jessie is in black. Like, everything else got completely reworked. But it was really fun. And that's when I went back. I actually added all the songs in the second draft. Like, I had placeholders. And part of what's so fun about getting to write a book like this is that you get to sort of build up, like, in retrospect, like, it feels like it's first to the reader, but you're the one who gets to control, like, oh, I should probably like emphasize this mirror in the bar when Jane's working in chapter 3, because I know that's going to be a lyric in Ursa Major later. And it's like this fun, so sort of almost like detective fiction. So yeah, it was super fun. That's a long answer. I just talked a lot.
No, I love that.
I love process.
That's great. How long did it take you to write the kind of your first draft, and then after your first draft was done, the book in kind of in its entirety?
So the like blurry, bad, adverby first draft was 6 weeks. It was like a flash. And then the rewrite was like 6 months. So, I think it's a lot. I'm an editor as well. Like, that's my day job. And it's a lot easier to work on things. And I'd love to hear if any of you are writers, like, what your experience is. It's a lot easier, I think, in general, for people to write when they have something on the page. So that was sort of my goal. It was like, I'm going to get something down, and then at least I'll have something and I can go from there. So it was really sort of a way of tricking myself and making the process as unintimidating as possible when I was really intimidated. So yeah, I'm a big fan of cheats.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. I'm Ivana. It's nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Hi,
because I was listening to you talk on the Thoughts from a Page podcast about your job and how you're an editor with a publisher. So for you to go from editor to author, I mean, was that so difficult for you to kind of switch hats and, How did you do that?
Thank you. It was very difficult because it's musculature, right? Like if you are, I'm going to reveal that I know nothing about sports right now when I try to make a sports metaphor, but I imagine it's something like going from being like, you know, like a defenseman in football to being a quarterback. Like your muscle, I mean, I guess that's not really possible because of the body types, but like your muscles are trained one way and going to the other way is really difficult. And so it was, I wrote like 15,000 words before I really like hit oil with Ursa. Before that 6-week chunk I was talking about, like there was a month before that where I was kind of like routing around, just trying to like build up some stamina, because part of what you're doing is you're like learning to get the editor out of the room, and you're learning to sort of sit there and try to create when you feel like every critical voice you've ever heard, every business decision you've ever made is sort of like swarming around your head. And I think a lot of writers feel that way. And I think for me, it was just like more personified because I knew actual editors. So ultimately where I landed was like just getting to the place where I was like, it can be really bad. Like you don't have to show it to anyone, but it's like, you will regret this if you don't actually try. So that was sort of how I landed. And there was a lot of stuff that I just kind of threw out. And I'm not precious. Like especially with a story that I love this much, it's worth it to have these sort of like, it's almost like a mental umbilical cord where you're like starting to like send out the nutrients. And the connecting cord is this like manuscript that you don't end up using, but it's like the chunk at the beginning that sort of allows you to like, I don't know, you get through your insecurities, you get through like bits and pieces of parallel stories that you could write, maybe thinking about writing, and then you eventually hit the start of the real one. And I know a lot of writers who have to go through sort of a cleaning of the pipes. And I think people do that like with morning pages. They have like a maintenance routine where every day they write those 3 pages. And then other people like me, I guess, do like the lazy man's version, which is like, we're just going to do the whole thing now. So you can be strategic about it and routine. And I wish I was more disciplined. I'll put it that way.
Well, it
It's very
turned out,
impressive.
yeah, it turned out great. I'm wondering, just kind of, you've alluded to the fact that you just changed a lot of things. Were there any major plot points that kind of worked their way into Songs of Ursa Major that were different or that you changed along the way? Like, were there any, scenarios
ending,
in your
maybe?
head? Yeah, like the ending that, you could have gone so many different directions with that. I'm curious what that process looked like.
It's so interesting. So major plot points, I would say no. Like I knew the end was going to be what it is. I knew the stuff with Charlotte was going to be in there. Some of that wasn't executed the way I wanted it to be. Like it was almost like the scaffolding was there, but I couldn't feel the tension and I couldn't like really see the characters. So it was putting sort of meat on the bones when I went back and really like went sentence by sentence and like I have this book memorized at this point. But yeah, there were like character developments. Like I would say Willie was very different the first round. Like when I first encountered him, I thought of him as this like corporate yes man, like the kind of guy that, talks a big game when it's just you, but then like when you're with the big boss, he never actually stands up for you. And I thought he was going to be weak. And in the original version, he doesn't stick with Jane. And the whole thing with the Grammys, like she ended up like she walked away from him. And so then when I rewrote the book, I kind of like, okay, so I basically between the first draft and the second draft, I rested the manuscript for a couple months where I just let it cool, which is also something I recommend. Stephen King recommended it, so I stole the trick from him. In his book, we're not friends, Stephen and I've never spoken to him, but on writing, highly recommend. And when I reread the book with my editor hat on, I wrote myself like a 17-page letter. And I basically was like, okay, like I actually think that Willie is Jane's foil because look at them. Like he has all of these like male relatives. He has this music like background. So does she. Like it's a family inheritance, right? And the characters are more parallel and they're both sort of tugging at different ends of the spectrum in a way that like I think Jesse and Charlotte are kind of tugging at each other invisibly for much of the book, but then Jane and Willie are really the facing sides. And once I dug into his psychology a little bit more and you know, like tried to make him not cardboard, it was amazing, because then I was like, oh no, I don't know what's going to happen with him. And for most of the book, like you're kind of like sitting on the fence, you're like, I don't know if he's going to be good or bad. And I didn't know that either. And then when he came to get her in Greece, I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is what this is going to be. And that was huge, because I didn't really know how it was going to come down. And, you know, part of what you're doing when you edit a book, especially a book that has like a couple years within the plot, you're sort of thinking about like, all right, what was my Chekhov gun? Like, who have I talked about at the beginning that I need to bring in at the end? Like, how will this be satisfying? It was like, it got to the point where it was like, well, I can't have talked about Willie's father for this whole book and not bring him in. And also, you know, Jane reaches a catharsis with her mother. And obviously Willie's not as central a character, but like we had to have a moment where they faced each other down, because otherwise it wouldn't be sort of symmetrical between these two poles of the story. So he was someone who really blossomed, and he's like one of my favorite characters in the book. And that was amazing. So it did have plot consequences, but it was more seeing him become a real person and watching their relationship unfold. That was really fun. And that changed.
Yeah. Wow. I love hearing about your thought process behind that. That's really fascinating. And now it makes me want to go back and like reread part of Willie's story just to kind of start seeing some of these threads a little bit earlier on. So, well, I feel like I could ask you a million questions, but I want to spread the love. So I'll start off with Susan. If you want to ask your question, go ahead. Oh, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Susan.
See, I was being such a good participant and muting myself, and then I forget. I do that at work all the time. Thanks. It's so great to see you, Emma. Thank you for joining us. You talked a lot about the research that you did about the music industry then, and I was curious if you have any personal experience in the music industry.
I don't have any personal experience in the music industry. Basically, a lot of the framework that I worked off of in terms of how the label functions is based on my own experience working in book publishing, which is a very anachronistic business. Like basically the way that books are published is the way that all media was released 50 years ago. So whereas like music went into MTV and they've become like predominantly digital with the performances, like book publishing has basically stayed the same. We chase the same media. We, you know, it's long leads, it's print. And knowing that, I was able to ask certain questions when I was going back and filling in like, okay, like who would be in the room for this part of the process? Who would have a call here? And I basically knew things just in terms of like a generic, I often say that it's like a mutually intelligible thing between books and music. And, you know, the big talent agencies do both. And so I had a framework in my head for like, okay, well, I know there's going to be a cover. I know there's going to be an approvals process for a cover. And even just sort of knowing that and knowing like when the album would go to print, like I knew intuitively that there would be like proofing processes, and I knew that there would be a timeline and the sell-in and all that. So I was able to go in and essentially like cut the research down by knowing exactly what I was looking for at certain points. And then a lot of the dynamics, like the character of Vincent Ray, the character of Simon, those archetypes kind of came up while I was researching Carly Simon and Joni Mitchell and Carole King and Linda Ronstadt. Linda actually has like a ton in common with Jane. Jane looks a lot like Joni, but Linda also started in a band, and she has a huge history of pushing back against the label and like constantly reinventing herself. So a lot of, you know, those characters were sort of composites of different common experiences that seemed to come up again and again and again for these women. And then the actual business itself, I kind of had a bird's eye view in from my job.
Excellent. Wow. Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that leads really great into Lyndon's question next, because I think she has a kind of a question about your career and how that informs some of your writing. Lyndon, are you? Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Thank you, and apologies for joining late. Thanks, Emma, for joining us tonight. My question is with regards to your publishing experience. I'm just wondering how your knowledge of the publishing industry might have influenced or not some of your plot choices in the book, in terms of knowing what might sell or what might be of interest to readers. So yeah, thanks so much.
That's a great question. And I think about this all the time. This is a question I ask myself every day. And I'm continuing to, as I think about like what I might want to try to write next. You know, it was sort of a part of that process of like getting the editor out of the room. Like I never fully succeeded because I can't unknow what I know in terms of like what works and what doesn't. And there was always a voice in the back of my head with Jane and with her story that was like, is this small or is this big? And by that I mean, like, are the stakes big here? Like, is there a life and death situation in this book? Does Jane take on something that's superlative? Like, does she become the best at something? Is she super talented? Like, all these things make the story bigger, make like an audience possibly more invested in it. And I felt very pushed to push her. Like my own, as I mentioned, like this started out as sort of like fantasy escapism for me. So if it was just up to me, the whole book would have been like Jane and Elsie sitting in a room, and Elsie being like, "You're a really good person and you try really hard." And Jane would have been like, "Thanks, Grandma." And that would have been the whole thing. So there were aspects of my personality that are clearly like in certain scenes, like the fact that it is basically a small town romance. Like there is sort of like this homey feel that's important to me and that I was looking for like as a almost reader. But then everything she does, like at a certain point I was like, well, she has to go on a tour, she's going to be a rock star. So that was sort of part of it where I didn't really feel like I was writing it. Like I knew she would have to do this, and it was sort of like, well, let's just see what happens. And I think that's an interesting thing when you're writing fiction, where you kind of push yourself over the cliff to the point where you're just making your best guesses and you're like, I can go fill this in later. And often that's where really great stuff happens. Like I'm a very quiet person. Like I live with my husband and my dog. I'm talking to you guys. I don't need to talk to anyone else for the rest of the week. But like Hannibal Fang apparently is someone that I like had in me, and I would never have met him if Jane had stayed with Elsie. I would never have met him if I hadn't forced myself to write a rock and roll tour. So there's a certain amount of like, once you know what kind of story you're in, like, so, okay, first step is figuring out like, are my stakes big? How big is this? Like, I want to push it to the biggest place. And that was intentional. And then the rest is sort of like, well, what story am I in? What needs to happen here? Like, there's a part where in that exact scene, Jane makes a joke about like jumping into the pool fully clothed. And it's like, there's a self-consciousness to that because I'm the writer and I'm like, well, what do I know about glamorous Hollywood parties? Like they all at some point jump into the pool. And I was like, I mean, this is like, I'm going to write this scene. It's got to be in this book because that's this kind of book. But like, what's my take on that? And my character makes a joke about it because I'm like, well, this is so cliche, but it has to happen. So there are different ways where you sort of have to like cop to your genre. And I think there were absolutely pieces of that to this as well. Like I knew going in as a business person, as an editor, that ultimately where this was going, if I was lucky enough to get an agent and get it acquired, is that I would have to have comp titles, which is how everything functions within publishing. Like all sales in publishing are completely anecdotal and reactive. So I knew that if I did a good job with this, they'd compare it to Daisy Jones. And I was thinking of Practical Magic or like one of the Alice Hoffman books was my other comp in my head. And I had those two in my head, not in terms of like necessarily copying plot points, but just thinking like, ultimately, this is how we're going to pitch this. And so I did have that in the back of my head, but it was more a way of sort of putting this question to bed. Like, I think this is something I'm thinking about a lot right now. Like, can people tell when you're in love with your book and can they not? Like, is there, if you do a great job and you're a really good writer, can you can you force that, or can people always tell? And I kind of think they can tell. That's the conclusion that I'm coming to. And I think also there's this aspect to putting yourself on the line as a writer where you're like, if I'm in love and they reject this, that's going to be really hard on me. So I think we're all kind of looking for guarantees when we're like allowing ourselves to love or not to love a book we're working on. I'm speaking as if this is like a writing class. But essentially, I think having those comps in my head for me was like, well, there's a market for this. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. And that was my way of like reassuring myself, even though I had no reassurance. Does that answer your question? It's like a long answer.
It does. That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think that having Daisy Jones as a comp is a bold move, but it paid off for you, I think. And I appreciated your book more than Daisy Jones, and that was kind of the consensus from our group too. But I just I feel like that's kind of a risky move, and saying, as an author, I'd be like, oh, don't compare me to Daisy Jones, because then if people have that in their mind, maybe they would be let down. But I feel like you have a totally different story to tell here, and it worked really well. So.
Oh yeah, no, as a writer, I have a really, if this isn't clear so far, I compartmentalize completely. So like as a writer thinking about that, I would never want to be compared to TJR for that exact reason, because it's so intimidating. But like as an editor, I'm like, well, that would be a great comp for these business reasons. So it's sort of like when you're really frustrated with a pedestrian and you're behind the wheel and you're like, can you just cross the street faster? Then you park the car and 5 seconds later, you're the one crossing the exact same crosswalk. And you're like, these cars are speeding. And it's just the same exact moment from different perspectives. And you are both people. That's definitely what this has been like.
That's so fascinating. Well, I'm going to pass you off to Annie quick. Annie had a question when we were just chatting in our group chat that I'm so curious about the plot, and maybe you could clarify a few things for us. So go ahead, Annie.
Well, thank you, Emma, for being here. I just love listening to you about your book publishing process. I had a question about the plot, and I got to the end, and I was hoping that Janie Q and Jessie would get together. So then when I heard that she had kids, I was wondering if in your head, were you thinking that readers might think that Jessie was the father?
Yes. So I love that question. And I really love your bookshelves with the twinkle lights, by the way. I wanted to tie everything up at the end, but I also wanted to be able to take it all back. So I don't know, like I wanted to give myself the option of possibly coming back to these characters. I mean, if Jane becomes a hardened second wave feminist producer in the 80s with Lacey, I want to be able to come back to that if I need to. And I also wanted to give Jessie like a resolution with kids and like a nice yoga teacher wife. And my way of doing that was just to like have exactly what you picked up on. Like I don't know exactly what happens with Jane, but I think possibly one of her daughters is with Jessie. So that could happen at some point. Like I definitely can see like older them, although part of it's like because James Taylor is such an inspiration, I'm like, it would have to really diverge because Jesse can't lose his hair. So we'll figure that out at some point. But yes, I definitely think there's a possibility of them like reconnecting sort of like this through the years.
Oh, that is juicy. I love that.
Yes, thank you.
Are you hinting at something that's coming, or are you just sort of like, maybe we could ask you that later too. Like, is there anything more to come? But,
I mean, for now, no, but I definitely want to leave it open. Like this is, as you can tell, like I go from like being like in my writer den, like very insecure, but then like in my editor head, I'm like, well, I could be like Alice Hoffman and return to this the way she returned to Practical Magic. So it's just sort of like, giving myself the option in a very best case scenario.
Love it.
Yeah,
you have like 22 readers that would probably be for sure.
Yeah. Love it. Guys, you're my faves. Ladies. I don't know if there are any men on this call. I shouldn't generalize.
There are not that I know of. If there's a lone man
through the whole carousel, yeah.
Yeah, if there's a lone man, hello to you. I don't see you, but welcome if you're here. Another plot point that we were chatting about was like Jane's mom. Does somebody want to ask that question? I don't want to steal your thunder if anybody wants to ask that. No? Okay, I'll ask it. Somebody had typed in during our chat, so did the mom actually write the song that was presumed to be stolen, or is that a mystery / up for interpretation?
So it is a mystery. I don't actually know. In my opinion, she did write it. And here's why I think that's the case. She had songs with Lacey, right? So we know she wrote these like hit songs. So she actually has songwriting history. We know she did it at least twice. And I just think that it wouldn't have broken her. Like, I don't think it would have been the trigger for the meltdown if she hadn't actually written it. But I don't definitively know. So I know that's a little infuriating, but that's sort of how I've approached it, writing it. I think she did write it.
Interesting. So I know that Jess and Missy have questions, but I'm not sure if they're on yet. Jess and Missy, are you here? I don't think so. Okay. I would love to know if anybody else has questions before I dig into a few more of mine. No. All right, well, I'm just going to keep going then. So I had heard on your podcast with Cindy from Thoughts from a Page that this might be like option for a film. And I just feel like the whole experience was so cinematic. Like as I was reading this, I feel like I was just watching everything play out right in front of me, and I could just picture everything so vividly. And so I could see how this would be so perfect for any kind of screen. And I'm just wondering if you have any more information that you're able to share about like what, or is that happening? What's the time frame for that?
I wish I knew. So I do have a little bit more information. So it was optioned. We have a script that I wrote. We finished the script in January. So that took like most of the second half of last year. And we're looking for a director. So my producers really want a woman. I do too. And they have like a few candidates they're talking to. So, I mean, they're going to have to renew the option in October if they want it. So we'll have to figure out like what's going on. But so far I've heard just enthusiasm, and we're like hoping for that perfect person, and that's like the next step in the process. So I don't know how long this takes. Like I used to check in once a month. Now I check in like less than that because I'm playing it cool. And I just truly have no idea how long any of this takes. Like authors that are so much bigger and so much more successful than I have been so far are waiting still. So I think a lot of it is to do with like I have wonderful producers who are organizing the whole thing, and they're just so into the book, which I like I'm very grateful for, and you don't always get that. And they've also been really wonderful with me in terms of like I've never written a movie, so they like guided me through that whole process. And yeah, I truly wish I could tell you the timeline. Like the last conversation I had was like, oh, we're definitely going to resolve this mid-August, and here we are. So I don't know, but I hope it's soon. I hope we have a director soon.
So would this be like a series for TV, or would it be a movie, or it could be either?
It's going to be a film. So if it happens, it's going to be a film, like a movie.
Yeah. So Can you talk a little bit about maybe some challenges or things that came easy or, were just different from writing the novel versus writing this, the screenplay essentially, or this script for that?
Yeah. It's really different. So like the word play in screenplay, I really can't emphasize enough how much of a play a screenplay is. Like one of the things that I never really thought about, like when I was writing the book, is all these little micro scenes I have. Like often I'll start a chapter, and for like a page or so, like Jane will be selling tinctures with Elsie at a market. And I just do that because I like to move my scenes. Like I like to have chapters where there's like a little bit of movement in them. And that can be like physical, that can be emotional, like anything counts, but I like to have a little bit of variety. And often there will be like one crucial piece of information that will be at like one of these locations. When you write a movie, you get 40 scenes. So when I initially sat down to adapt this, I started mapping it out in my head. I was like, 40 scenes, I've got 50 chapters, really 48, it's going to be great. And then I wrote out all those micro scenes, and I had like 300 scenes in the book. So figuring out how to distill that down was crazy. The other thing I thought was fascinating was I've often been critical of movies. I love rom-coms, but I'm always like, oh, she met him 2 times and now they're in love. What is that? That's not life. And you can tell like in Ursa Major, like they get some time together on the island before they're like in a relationship. Like that's important to me to have, you know, actual relationships that form. In the movie, if you ever see it, if it ever happens, like completely sold out. I was like, I get why they do it this way. We will have them bond in one night, and now they are together. Because I tried it every other way, and it was like, oh my God, we're like 50 minutes into this movie and they still haven't kissed. Okay. So time moves very differently is what I've learned. And you think that you can do a lot of crazy things, like in terms of like cutting from place to place. You would think that would be easier in a screenplay. You can't. That's the thing I learned with the micro scenes. And then also just the way you describe things, like in a book, you would never, or you would rarely be so literal as to be like, she looked at him and he knew exactly, like he knew that her catharsis was happening right now. Like you would show that, and you would have metaphors, and you would be figurative about it. And in a screenplay, you literally write out like what the emotions are happening like inside, but you can't do it in a way that's directing. So it's, I learned a lot. I learned so much, and it's really, really hard to do, but it was cool because there were all these, like, I think a lot of books come out with twins, like, or triplets. Like, I think there are roads not taken, and there were things that I wanted to try in the book, but they wouldn't have worked because the reading experience is so completely different. And so it gave me the opportunity to do a bunch of scenes that I'd wanted to write, but they didn't fit. So that was really cool. And there are other pieces, like we played up like the politics around Greg and Kyle being Native American way more, and we played up Vietnam way more. Like there's a little bit more edge to the movie than there is to the book in terms of like political stuff. So that was cool too, because it was like even more research for the tour stuff, like getting to look at all of the protests that were going on and figure out like, okay, what date is it? What city would they be in? What student protests would have been happening here? Like that was really fun. And newspaper archives are amazing. Like you can find so much stuff on the internet. So yeah, it was crazy. It was like getting to do it all over again.
Yes, well, I think I speak for everybody, and we hope that that comes to fruition. We would love to watch that, and that would be fun for us to all watch together and chat about. So,
guys, if it gets made, we'll have a reunion of tonight.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Well, a couple of the girls had submitted questions ahead of time, but I don't think that they're on. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jess and Missy. But Missy was wondering what your process was like for writing the lyrics. And, you know, did you feel like the lyrics came easy for you compared to like writing the prose, or, you know, vice versa?
That's a great question. So my process with writing the lyrics, like I kind of mentioned this earlier, so basically I took this pause between the first and the second draft, and I wrote all the lyrics in the middle, like while I was pausing the book. So basically I'd wake up at 5, I'd want to like work on my book, but I was not allowing myself to do that. And so instead I'd be like, well, why don't you write one of the 35 songs you reference in this book? And so I had to do Jane, I had to do the Breakers, I had to do Jessie, Lacey, like all these different kinds of songs. And I think the volume of it, like the volume of having to do all of that, because I wanted to be able to have it sound real. And when people reference songs, it's like the iceberg, right? Like you see 1/8, but the rest has to be below the water for it to like carry. So I was like, I'm gonna do the whole thing. It's gonna be great. And I think because I had to do so many, I couldn't be precious, and it forced me to just go for it. And the other thing is I was writing not as myself. Like the ballad of Double-Sided Parking, which is the Emma Brodie ballad, was not a part of this thing. It was like from Jane's perspective. So I was freed up because it was like, well, what's her drama? What's she going through? And that was nice. So yeah, I basically wrote one a day. A lot of them were just like, I got into a form, like, 2 verses, bridge, chorus, last verse. And I was listening to so much James Taylor and Joni Mitchell at the time that I had a lot of different like ideas in my head. Like I was really grounded in that elemental imagery. There are a few where I had to be like extremely meticulous, like Ursa Major, I wrote like 6 or 7 times because it's the title song of the book. You want it to be good. And also like that song had to accomplish a lot for the plot. Wallflower and Lilac Waltz also, like those actually I have melodies for both of those. Like I can sing that duet she plays. So having that was good. And like there were some that took more effort. And then there were other ones where it was like I was sort of pairing them to real life songs. Like, Jane's relationship with Wallflower is inspired by Joni's relationship with Little Green, which is a song she wrote on Blue, where she fully discloses that she had a daughter that she gave up for adoption, and no one knew what to make of this song. Like the Rolling Stones reporter that wrote about it, Rolling Stone reporter, not Stones, wrote this song passeth all understanding. Like they didn't know what it was about. And I wanted to do the reverse for Jane, where instead of having a baby that she, was concealing, she had a mother that she was concealing. So that was something that was like part of the book from the beginning. Like I knew that was coming, and I knew that I wanted those songs to have a relationship. So, that stuff took more consideration, but I was able to send a bunch of songs to my little brother, who's a really good guitarist. So there were like 10 or so where he was like going through a thing. There was this girl, whatever. He'd like be like, I need lyrics. Like I'm mad. I need lyrics. I'm like, oh, well, if you're mad, then I can just send you this song and you can write me like brand new cassette. Oh, well, thanks. And so I have a few where I got to like hear melodies that go with them. And some of them correspond with like what I would want, and some of them don't. He didn't read the book until long after it was published. So, some were hits, some were misses. But what was cool was that when I then went back to edit the book, I had insights that I didn't have when I first wrote it about the writing process, because I'd actually gotten to do it a little bit with my brother. So that was cool. So that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, I love that. In my head, I had made up a lot of melodies, and I wish they were yours instead of mine.
I'm sure yours are amazing.
They're not great. So
did everybody else sing when you got there, like to yourself? Because I did. I like hummed it. I was just wondering if everybody else was doing that at home, like when you're reading the physical book.
I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I just thought everybody was doing that maybe.
All right, I think Brittany has a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I saw that your dedication was to your grandmothers and your aunt, and this has such like strong female family for Jane. And I was just wondering if like you modeled some of that after your own family, and then it sort of dissipated into its own direction, or some of them are very modeled after a specific person in your family. I was just thinking, I actually thought about that when I was first reading the book after I'd read the dedication, and then I kind of wasn't thinking about it as much later, but I was just kind of curious.
That's such a great question. I would say you summarized it well. I had certain people and certain feelings that I had at various points. Like Jane's 19 when the story began. I'm 32, but I had certain feelings that I remembered having like as a teen visiting my aunt and my grandma that I was like trying to capture in the book. And then from there, they split into very different people. Like I think the first draft, part of what was kind of lame, I shouldn't say that, that's derogatory. Part of what was like needed some work in the first draft was that I let myself have fun with it. So initially, like that breakfast scene where Jane comes down and sees her grandma, her cousin, and her aunt, it was very saccharine, and everyone was like here to help. And I ultimately went back and added a lot of texture into all those characters that is not there. They became different people. But I think initially I was about to get married. I got married when I was like resting the manuscript, and I like when you have one of those moments, like I don't know like if any of you have had an experience like this, but you miss the people that have died. And one of my grandmothers is still alive, one of them is not, and my aunt, who I dedicated the book to, passed away really unexpectedly a few years ago. And she's a big source of inspiration for me. Like we kind of look alike, and she's just a very important person in my life. And ultimately, like Grace wound up being sort of Jane's moral compass, right? Like Elsie's a bit of an enabler, but she lets Jane be who she is, and Jane sort of tells her the truth of what's happening. Grace is Jane's conscience, and Jane can't always live up to the person that Grace wants. My aunt wasn't like that. Like my aunt was really chill, and ultimately like the people in Jane's sphere, like Maggie as well. Like I have a sister, and I think I'm a lot more like Maggie. Like I'm the mean one, and my sister's more like Jane. Like I'm an oldest as well, and Jane's the youngest. So people sort of started moving around once I started writing it. And like my mother is like a super like wooey, like Elsie like person. So I think there was a lot of my mom actually in the grandmother character. And then like there are aspects of my mom that are also in Charlotte. Like it's both very flattering and not. But people like creep all over the place. Like it broke down very quickly, like from being sort of like taken from this feeling I had of safety and of being important to these women, and feeling this sense of legacy that I do feel. Like my mom is one of 8 kids, and I have a lot of aunts. And so, yeah, it started in a real place, and then it very quickly moved into like its own thing. That's a great question.
Thanks. That was a great answer. I love hearing about kind of the behind the scenes dynamic stuff. So thank you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And Ivana, you kind of asked this maybe in a different way. I am wondering, you mentioned like you don't know if you'll come back to this story specifically, but do you have other stories that are kind of like brewing in your brain that you think you might need to get on paper at some point? Or do you feel like you're just going to go back to not just, but return to your day job with editing and the publishing industry?
No, I definitely want to keep writing. Like this is so important to me, and I definitely want to do more books. So I don't know exactly what's happening yet. Like part of me doesn't want to do a straight sequel to Ursa because I want to be able to branch out. And I feel like sophomore books are hard in general. And so I'm really intimidated about having to write the second book already. And I want to make sure I don't box myself in too quickly. So there's part of me, like the strategic part of my brain is like, I should branch out and do something that's like, not so different. Like it's still going to be me, but like a little different, just to make sure that I'm not like limiting myself. Like I don't want to just do music books, for example, even though music is a huge part of my life. And I will obviously always have some element of that present. So when I was writing this and when I was in that phase where I was developing it and like homing in on like, okay, is it going to be contemporary? Is it going to be, a historic fiction, like this and that? I also like part of having Jane be 7th generation on this island is that like, at one point I like had a notebook that was full of like all of her relatives that came before. So there are opportunities to do other Quinn women, from different eras, like a flapper book with young Elsie. How fun would that be? And like I mentioned, like when Jane and Lacey have their chat in Laurel Canyon, like Lacey remembers Elsie's sisters. So like there are other Quinns that have been sort of like alluded to, and I did that on purpose to give myself a possibility of like if Ursa's huge, I'll go back and I can do these other things. So I definitely could see like slivers, and I love this family, and I love how they're like imbued with feminist independence before those were buzzwords, and like it's just part of who they are. So I can see like, I can also see like having a different book, but like a Quinn woman makes a cameo, or like someone like references Bailey Island. Like I like the idea of having things like continue to be alive, even if they're not in the forefront. Because I'm sad to leave. Like, I don't want to. I love it there. So we'll see. What would you guys want? Yeah, what do you want for the next book?
All of those ideas sound great. I was just going to ask you one more question, because when you were on the podcast, it was springtime, and we were saying how the summer will be your time to promote your book. And how was your summer, and how was there anything that like stood out to you as being sort of, you know, because I feel like we can get the inside scoop with you as like a published author. Like, were you like in Target? Have you seen your books? Have you like, what was the best part of your summer as far as releasing your book to the world?
What a good question. I mean, it's gone on for so long. So normally, like pre-pandemic, you get like maybe a month. And because now we're in this universe where we have Zoom events, here we are in September, and I had a June release. So that is amazing. And to get to still be meeting readers, like pre-pandemic, this never happened. So I'm so grateful in a way for the fact that like this technology is allowed for me to have like moments like this. Like, this is so amazing. Virtual events are hard. I still get really nervous for them. And preparing, like, it's always fine when you're talking to people, you're like, oh, book people, nice people. But like before, it's nerve-wracking. Then after, you're like, so that was like, I never really done it. Like, as you know, I have a job, I do Zoom meetings. But it was fascinating. Like, I don't know if you guys have done Zoom weddings or Zoom funerals. Like, it's weirdly like not less intense, even though you're doing it over video. So having like one event a week all summer has been like, I just took a 2-week vacation and I'm feeling great, but I was really tired by the end. Getting to see it in stores was amazing. My husband is in book production. He orders the paper and like makes sure the books hit the warehouse on time. Like, he works on the physical books. So, and he works at at the company that publishes Ursa, but in a different division. So he has no control, but he can kind of spy, which I like. So we've both had experiences where a book that we work on like the book comes out in the bookstore, and you go to see it the day it goes on sale, and it's not there because, as you guys know, new books come out every Tuesday. You can walk in the store and they just simply haven't unpacked the book yet. So he didn't want that to happen to me. So he called the bookstore in our town ahead of time and was like, my wife has a book coming. Can you please like make sure it's there June 22? Okay, great. So the week before, we walk into the bookstore and Ursa is out. Like, they got his message and they put the book out a week early. And so it was sort of like bumping into someone you've been on like a couple dates with when you're not expecting to see them. And I was in like leggings and I was like, oh my God, I'm seeing my book in the wild for the first time. And I'm wearing like a sports bra and a t-shirt. Oh my God. And I like ran out of the bookstore, and no one cares, by the way. And Kevin comes out after me and he's like, I understand, like, you're like, you know, this is overwhelming, but like, you're going to have to be gracious and like learn how to do this. So you don't have to do it now, but like, eventually you're going to have to like, I was like, okay. So I went in and I was like, hi, I wrote this. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I wrote this. And like, they were so nice. And I got to sign copies. So it was this amazing experience of getting to like see it in the wild. And I was not expecting it because it wasn't on sale yet. So that was cool. And that was like there are a lot of things in this process that are familiar to me because it's my job. And so that was something that I really felt like a real author, where I was like, oh my God, I'm seeing my book. This is crazy. So that's my book release story.
Well, and your husband is very sweet.
Oh yeah, he's the best, Kevin.
Kevin, yes.
So that makes me wonder. So I have your book here, and the cover is lovely.
Oh yeah.
What was the process like for selecting the cover, and did you have any say? How did that go?
So I do illustrated books. So the cover was hands down the hardest for me to like let go of my normal amount of editor control. We did a consumer survey. Because I was like so nervous about it. So this was the design my publisher really liked. They originally brought it to me in all orange. Like, the whole thing was like the orange yellow spectrum. And I was like, no, like Joni's blue is the inspiration for this book. Like we have to have some blue. So it ended up becoming this like turquoise teal color. The biggest, like, you know how when you have a zit, you know you have a zit, but no one else notices. The zit of my cover is the hat on Jane, because she never wears a hat in the book. And so I noticed it every time I look at it. I'm telling you now that I have a zit in this hat, but that is the one thing that I have like serious ambivalence over. But I love the font. I think it photographs really well. Like I almost like pictures of the book more than I like the book itself, because people do these cool things where they saturate it or they like make it a little bit like purplier, and I love that. And yeah, it's a fascinating process. It is like having a baby and like someone else is dressing the baby and putting it out in public, and you're like, but I didn't pick out that outfit, but I guess I'm okay with it, but not that hat. But okay, we're going with the hat. So yeah. Probably more information than you're looking for, but
no, I love that. That's great. Well, I want to be respectful of your time here, but I'm wondering if we could all, if anybody has their book, if we wanted to just get like a quick little screenshot do it for the gram.
Oh, so fun. And also, if you guys want book plates, I'm happy to like sign and send them. Like I have a lot of stamps, so just like let me know your info and I can put one in the mail for you.
Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you. All right. And if you have the audio, just hold up your phone and you listened. So, okay. I think we'll see how this goes. All right.
Should I get one too?
Huh? Sure. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, we'll do one more just in case anything weird happened. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Does anybody else have any more questions before we let Emma go?
I have one question. It doesn't have to do with the book at all, although I'm a huge fan of the book, and thank you so much for doing this. I'm like a little bit starstruck right now, and I think that is kind of where my question is going to go. Since you have kind of, this is your debut, have you ever been starstruck? I know you mentioned like a party, a Hollywood party, but like when were you the biggest starstruck in the industry?
When was I the biggest starstruck? That's such a good question. And I have to tell you, the character that I relate to most in this book is Mary Beth Kent, the reporter who like spies on celebrities. So I rarely get starstruck. I think the time I've been the most starstruck was meeting Sarah McLean, who's a romance author that I'm obsessed with. And when I was working at HarperCollins, she's published by Avon. So her editor was my friend and I got to meet her and I was like stuttering the whole time. Yeah, that's probably the time where I was the most. But like when I was working at Clarkson Potter, they do all these celebrity cookbooks and I was an assistant. So I had to get people water a lot. And so I got to meet a lot of celebrities that way. And I was like, oh, whatever. like, ugh. Like once you get someone a sandwich, you're like, okay, fine. But yeah, she was someone I really admire. Once I got to ride the elevator with Gloria Steinem, that was really cool. And so that was when I was working at Potter, and the head of security was this like former Chicago Cubs like security manager at the baseball stadium, like literally like Bruce Willis's character in Unbreakable. Or what was that movie called? I think that's what it was called. Anyway, we were in the elevator, this like waft of sunshine comes in and I was like, oh my God, it's Gloria Steinem. And like the doors close, you can like see her face. She gets out and I was like, she left and the guy and I were there and I was like, that was Gloria Steinem. And he just goes, yep. I was like, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So clearly I should meet more celebrities. Now I'd have a better answer for you.
Any other questions?
Well, I was just going to ask, because you said you don't have a background in the music industry, but you alluded to the fact that music is really important to you. So I was just curious as to what's your favorite music to listen to.
Oh man. Okay. So the truth about me is that I love bubblegum pop. Like I love, like, especially like early aughts bubblegum pop. Like I listened to NSYNC earlier today. And I really like the Counting Crows CD, Films About Ghosts. Like I love, and I'm also like an embarrassing listener where I listen to the same like one song over and over and over again. Like I love the song Bad Day by Daniel Powter. Like I genuinely love that song, and it's so embarrassing, but that's like my most listened to song. So I hope my Spotify is private. I'm just like thinking about this right now. And so then I also have like subgenres I like. Like I like a lot of my parents' music. But yeah, that's like what I actually like. Mandy Moore is like my number one. Like I love her. That's actually how I discovered Joni Mitchell. So I'm trash. Like this is like the truth about me. But yeah.
Well, we loved the Spotify playlist that you put together for the book. It was awesome.
Oh my God, so good. John Martin. Okay, so the song Run Honey Run, there's a pop cover of it that's amazing. That has like a dub thing, what's amazing. But that song was like my treasure for this book. Like I'd never heard him before. And he's Irish and just does these like stoner ballads that are so good. And his guitar skills are like, I think very similar to JT's, but like I'd never heard of him and I couldn't believe it. So I put him on there. And yeah, that Linda Ronstadt Stone Pony song, like, can you believe that? It's ridiculous. It's so good. So yeah, I'm glad you like it. I like it too.
That's great.
Emma, I just want to say, like, you have been so transparent and so open. You make me want to read the book again.
Aww.
Like, just because your personality is really coming through. One of the things I just wanted to say that I thought was so interesting was, you know, when I read about you and read the back cover, instantly I love that you named your dog Freddie Mercury. And I was like, of course, this person would write a book about the music industry. So it really isn't a question, but it's just something that really helped me to connect with you right away. Whenever I'm a reader and whenever I, you know, get into a book or I get lost somewhere in a book, I always go learn more about the author, and that helps me. I didn't have to do that with your book. I mean, I was instantly connected, and I just thought that was so cute that you mentioned that in your bio. I think it connects readers to you as an author so much.
That's great. That comes up so often. It's like such a conversation. And I did it for the most cynical reason. I didn't name him this, but I put it in the bio because I wanted to help it rise in search. So I was like, well, I have a dog with the name Freddie Mercury. I might as well like put this in here. And I love that you said that because it comes up and Freddie Mercury is so amazing and he is just such a connector. And, you know, if you meet a fellow Queen fan, like you have that together. And yeah, We Are the Champions was playing when we adopted Freddie. So that's why we named him that.
Love it. Love it.
He's a diva too.
Of course, as he should be with that name. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. Does anybody have any last burning questions before we let Emma go?
Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's
been the best. I'm gonna miss seeing all the posts because it's felt like such a community. So I'm really appreciative to all of you for reading it and for having me. This is just such a blast. So
you're the sweetest. Thank you. We're gonna spread the word.
Okay. Oh my God, amazing. And if you want book plates, I guess I'm giving them your email addresses to email me or whatever, but like happy to send. So thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you so much. We loved it.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, Emma. Thanks,
Bye.
Kelly.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
That was so fun.
Oh, well, that was good.
Right. So fun.
I know. I feel like she made it so easy. Like
the sweetest. Really, just I do want to like go back almost and just like reread.
I know, especially when she was talking about, how she set things up and the characters being symmetrical. And I'm like, Oh, I did not pick up on that. I
I
did
just
not
can't believe how much she's done in like her lifetime. Like it makes me feel like, what have I done? Oh, I love it. That was so great. How fun. Thanks for hosting it too. You were very great with your questions and that was awesome.
Yeah, she was so like so sweet and so easy. I just feel like I almost like don't want to find another author because I'm like, I feel like they want to be.
She was very relatable, very easy to like, but that was a good turnout too. It was so great.
Yeah, I know. My mom, she was like, she texted, she's
I
like,
was hoping she would come.
No, she's like, I'm just too nervous. I can't come on. I'll watch the recording. I'm like, okay.
That's
great.
so cute. Well, we'll have to brainstorm. I feel like I would love to do that again.
Oh, I would
Just
too.
to think about with who.
I know. Well, at that event that is in that buffet like event is I think next week. So I'll tune into that and
okay.
let you know. So
that sounds good, friend. Awesome.
Well, it was so great meeting you last week.
I know. I still just my family like totally knows your name now. Neil's like, okay, are you and Kelly getting on first? Like, is it just, it's like, oh my God, I gotta go. What time is it? Oh my God.
Yes. Well, I had some of your sangria tonight and it was lovely. So thank you.
So lovely. I like rushed down here. I didn't even have time to like pour a drink or anything. I'm gonna go put the kids to bed and grade some papers and go to bed.
Yes. Well, thank you for hopping on.
Awesome. That was so fun.
It was great. I loved it.
Yeah. We'll chat soon, I'm sure.
Yes. Sounds good. I'll talk to you later, Ivana.
All right. Bye.
Bye.